If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Scene Snob Interviews. Today on Mike's show, I have Jack O'Halloran, who played Non in Superman and Superman 2, one of the Kryptonians that is fighting Superman, but he has so much more to his legacy than that. He started out in Hollywood working with Robert Mitchum on Farewell, My Lovely, and continued to work with great names all the way through. He also wrote a book called Family Legacy because he is the son of Albert and Anastasia, who is the crime boss before the Gambino family took over. And it's an amazing story that we touch into in this interview. And I really look forward to you guys checking it out. And we talk about his boxing career and so much more. So enjoy the show. And then make sure you hit the like and subscribe button, after checking it out, and follow us at the Scene Snob. Thanks very much, and everybody take care. Bye. Just gonna ask some questions, and any stories that you have for me, I'm always up for listening.
Where are you located at?
I'm in Virginia now, but I'm actually from New Jersey.
What part of New Jersey?
I grew up in Jersey City.
Okay.
So, a lot. I know some of your stories. You're out of Philly, right?
Born in Philly, yeah.
Yeah, and then you lived in Jersey for a time, didn't you?
Yeah, Runnymede. Graduated high school from Runnymede, New Jersey, down in South Jersey, off the Black Horse Pike.
Oh, nice. Okay. Oh, wow. All right. And I do know to kind of get things started. I do apologize. I know that you played professional football for the Jets, and I'm a Giants fan, so.
We actually didn't get to play. We were in the system. It was at a period of time when you couldn't play pro ball till your class graduated college.
Really?
They should have that. Yeah, they didn't have hardship cases then. So didn't care who you were, Johnny Unitas, everybody had to wait till their class would graduated from college before they were allowed to play ball. So they had like farm system teams where you played semi-pro or pros, like a lot of pros in the league playing, guys waiting to go up and play. And I played on a team, Tinicum AC out of Philly, which Christie brothers played on, and a lot of guys that went up to the Jets and that were owned by the Jets and a couple other teams. And it was, you just wait at your time. And then when it came time to go up and play, Philly had a great team. And I told Eubank I would like to go down to Philly to play. And he said, well, you got a home here if you want it. And so the team was just bought by Jerry Wallman in Philly. Then he turned around and hired that idiot Joe Q. Harrick. And I watched the guy trade a championship football team. I mean, he traded away Tommy McDonald and Sonny Jurgensen for Norman Snead with Washington, and then traded away Maxie Vaughn. He traded a lot of great ball players away. And I said, wow, this is not good. And Ali had just won the title. And Timmy Brown and I came out of a meeting one day, and Timmy said, trade me while you're at it. And Timmy was an all-pro running back. And so I said, I can beat that Ali guy. So some people said, you know what, let's put you in the gym and find out. So there you go.
And that's how it got. That's how the boxing career got started, huh? And
yeah, and I was, when I was playing ball, I weighed like 280, but I ran a 4.6 40, and so I had to come down and wait. They put me in the gym, and I trained for several months to get down to 230 and do a boxing condition weight. And found out that boxing was a hell of a lot more conditioning than football was.
Yeah, absolutely.
I used to bring guys from the Eagles. I would bring guys down to the gym to see if they could last a round, but they'd be huffing and puffing. Oh my God, how do you do this every day?
Yeah, because I mean, you definitely get more rests in football than you do boxing, but
Well, yeah, it's just, you know, you.
that had to be an amazing time coming up in boxing, and phew, one of the most powerful times for the sport.
Oh yeah, it was great. It was. I mean, there's a lot of great fighters in that time era, especially the heavyweight division. My God, there was. Yeah, I mean, I know 20 heavyweights at that time that would have been champion today.
And you used to spar a bit with Ali. You and Ali were friends, right?
Well, we were signed to fight 4 times. You know, we were pretty good friends. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And how was he as I mean, it's Muhammad Ali, I gotta imagine.
And Joe Frazier and I were supposed to fight in Houston. That didn't happen.
Oh,
That's a funny story. But you know, Joe. We all came from Philadelphia. All of us were fighting at the same time, and there were 2 fighters, heavyweights, that he would never fight. Was one myself, and Leotis Martin was the other one.
what was
Leotis Martin was a pretty good fighter.
You came out and you fought a lot of the greats. I mean, you had a great record too. Didn't you? You had 17 knockouts.
Yeah, I had you know, it just the sad part was that, you know, when I was like undefeated at 16-0, I think, and they did a medical on me, and they found out I had a disease called acromegaly, which is a tumor of the pituitary, and shouldn't have been fighting at all. And they done even doctors said, how can you possibly get up for a fight? Because your body was putting out 10% growth hormone, mine was putting out 150. So you're eating up your energies and stuff. And they just couldn't figure that one out. So, you know, it's just, I just said, great day job. I'm going to keep it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Just push through it. You know, it's just so, a lot of people say, my God, if you hadn't had that, where would you, you know, and I don't look over spilt milk. You just do what you got to do. And it was, I had a night job involving my father's world, and I had a day job involving boxing. So, but my problem was I would take a fight on a week's notice and stuff like that, because I could fight.
Mm-hmm.
You know, going 10 rounds was no big deal.
Well, was that more common practice back in the day, where you would take the fights that quickly? You know.
No, people used to train for a month, 2 months, you know, for big fights, and I just.
Yeah.
I mean, I fought Norton on a week's notice. I fought Foreman. I only trained a week for Foreman. I fought a lot of guys like that. Just, but I could, like I said, I had an ability, and it was a God gift, and I abused it. Actually, you know. So I don't blame anybody but myself. I just didn't. I wouldn't listen, and I did what I wanted to do. And when I got in shape, when I was in really good shape, I beat some of the best in the world and beat them easy.
Yeah, when you have that time, I guess it definitely does make the difference, all the difference. But I got to ask, what was it like going toe-to-toe with George Foreman?
Everybody asks me that. George and I are pretty good friends. That was another fight. I think I trained like 10 days for it or something like that, a week or so. And the first couple rounds, I was actually beating him. And I walked into a punch, my own fault. But I was mad because I got up and they stopped the fight real quick. They were looking for any excuse to stop it. And George, he would never fight me again. We laugh about it, you know.
And anybody, you said that you worked for your father's business at night. Now, you know, for anybody listening who may not be aware, your father was one of the most infamous crime bosses.
Yeah,
back
he
in
was.
The Gambino family.
He was the Gambino family before it became. Gambino was his underboss. Albert was the head of a little company called Merger Incorporated.
Yeah.
And he was partners with Luciana and Costello, and then Frank when Charlie put together the commission, and Albert took over a family and had his own family, and then when they assassinated him in '57, because he wouldn't go in the drug business, and it became the Gambino family. But Genovese was a shit stir, and he wanted the drug business badly, and there's so much money involved and stuff. If you ever watch The Godfather, when they went to Brando, and Brando was asked to go in the drug business, he said, if I touch it, my children will touch it, it'll be the downfall of the families. Well, my father said that. So
wow, really?
And my father controlled all the ports. And he said, "You're not bringing that shit under my watch." And they just they begged him the night before his assassination. At the same hotel he got assassinated, they sat and they said, "Albert, it's only business. Just let it go." And he said, "No, not on my watch. I didn't sign up for this." So
that's incredible, and that's so much influence too. Because that's a huge.
Well, they made a very bad mistake, and they even came to me 2 years afterwards and said it was a terrible, one of the worst mistakes they ever made, because Albert was the glue that held everything together. After he was assassinated, things started falling apart because Genovese had the big meeting in in Appalachia, New York, and that exposed them to the world. And when Albert was gone, there was no more connection. Albert had a great connection with Hoover because in 1939, Louis Lipke had to turn himself over to the FBI, and they made a deal, and it was brokered by Walter Winchell, where he went from my father's car into Hoover's car in 39. The FBI didn't capture him. He turned himself in, and it was the first real #1 crime guy that they ever locked up. And they didn't bust him. He walked in their door because he was costing the families a lot of money. So there was a deal with Hoover, and they had never had a problem. Hoover stood up and said, "There's no such thing as organized crime in New York." And they went down the street very happily for several years, and until my father's death, and then all deals were off. And Hoover, and when Appalachian happened, it gave Hoover the excuse to say, "We're coming after you." And then Bobby Kennedy was there, and shit hit the fan.
What was how involved were you in the life? I know.
Well, you got. I don't know how much you know about the families, but when I was 19 years old, I was what you call a made individual. So once you take that oath and you're in there, I'm in there for life. It's just, so I was very much involved in the unions and stuff, and organizing and doing things with the iron workers and the bartenders and waiters union, and a couple of the Teamsters, and I was good friends of Hoffa. And
oh wow!
So we did a lot of things all over the country. It was, when I was boxing, I took fights everywhere, Ohio, this place, that place, because I was doing business there as well. So it gave me an excuse to be there. In those days, you had to have a day job, or the law would be looking at you all the time. So, and I had a pretty good day job. I was a prominent heavyweight, world ranked heavyweight. So it gave me excuses to be in this city or that city, So I would take fights on a week notice and say, "Yeah, I'm gonna," because I had other business to do there. So it worked out pretty well.
When you were boxing and you were a made man, did you, once you had to get out of boxing and you transitioned into Hollywood, how was that with the family? Did that bring on unwanted attention?
It was okay. They tried to get me to go in the film business a couple times prior to retiring from fighting, and I kept turning it down. And then when I went into film business, I never asked them for any favors, which I could have done and made life a lot easier for myself. But I didn't want to drag that behind me because I saw what was going on, and I saw the transitions. And I was very lucky to have some pretty smart people around me, Frank Costello and Myron Lansky and Raymond Patriarca, and a couple of people that really looked after my best interest. And so I never put myself in one particular place and say I was affiliated with that gang or anything of that nature. So they could never put a conspiracy rap on me. So all my dear friends that I grew up with and stuff did 30 and 40 years because they never would open their mouths because we took an oath.
Yeah.
But I never faced that dilemma because they could never catch me. So it was always a couple feet ahead of them because I moved from here to there to here to there. And I listened to people. So it's, you're always there to help and to guide certain things that have to be And we have a lot of legitimacy today. We still have some control in unions and stuff, but it's not like it was years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, once you got into and started taking more of the Hollywood route, and you had retired from boxing, I know your first movie, which I have to ask about, Farewell, My Lovely, which you worked with Robert Mitchum, which that's
a great film. It's a great film. It's and when like I said, I turned down a couple big movies, The Great White Hope, and Steve McQueen did Thomas Crown Affair in Boston in '66, and he and I became really good friends. And he wanted me to go in the movie business then and come to Hollywood, and I said, nah. So when I turned down The Great White Hope, and people said, "You crazy, man?" I said, well, I thought I just beat the number 2 heavyweight in the world. I'm looking to fight Ali. What I want to go to Spain for 6 months for? So and then when I retired, I had a woman in San Diego when I was California heavyweight champion, where I used to do commercials for Royal Crown Coal and a few other big companies. And she called me on the phone. She said, "They're looking for you." And I said, "Who's looking for me?" She said, "Hollywood. They want you to do this film, Farewell, My Lovely, with Robert Mitchum, and I think you should do it." And I looked around where I was. I said, "You know what? Maybe it's time." And they flew me out to Hollywood, and I did a screen test, and Mitchum said, "It's either him or I don't do the movie." So I blame it all on Robert Mitchum.
How was Robert Mitchum? I mean, that's
he was incredible. He was, if you ever had to have a mentor in your life or something, Robert was just an incredible individual. I mean, he and I became very close, and he was a great teacher, boy. He walked me right through the industry and helped me tremendously. And Farewell was the first time I was ever in front of the camera. He just taught me the technical aspects of it all, and it worked really good. We had a lot of fun doing it.
And you went from toe to toe with Philip Marlowe, which I love. I'll watch or read anything Philip Marlowe. So you go toe to toe with Philip Marlowe, and then your very next film, King Kong.
Yeah, King Kong was it was a great cast, and Jesse's first picture, and she was you knew she was a star when she walked on the set. No. Jeff Bridges and Charlie Grodin, and there were a lot of John Randolph. I mean, there were tremendous cast they had, and it was a long shoot. I mean, we shot 9 months for that picture, and it had a great cast. We had a great script. And it was a good movie. It turned out very well.
Oh, absolutely. And that was like the big resurgence for that character too, of King Kong, to come back.
Yeah, no.
So, not a bad second movie to have on your on the resume too.
No, not bad at all. I just went from picture to picture after that, and it worked out pretty well. I turned down a few pictures I shouldn't have turned down, but you don't cry over spilt milk. You just keep on walking,
Very true. So one thing I do have to ask though, with your boxing background, you worked with Sylvester Stallone on Farewell, My Lovely. He had a bit part on it.
That's how he got the Rocky story. He never been to Philly. I mean, he went to school, they say, there for a semester or something, but he actually went to school in Switzerland, I think. He was picking my brain every day. He was writing a script about a boxer, and he knew I was a world-ranked fighter, and he knew I was signed to fight Ali. And so I told him about Philadelphia, and I was the gangster fighter in Philly. And I was related to the waterfront and all that stuff, and I gave him all that information. So the Rocky story was the gym that they used. They said it was in North Philly, but it was at Passyunket Moor. And we went up 3 stories. It was an old, crusty old gym. A lot of great fighters trained out of it. So I gave him all that, all the depictions of how coming up as a fighter in Philadelphia. And in the morning when he was cracking the eggs and his stuff, that was me. I did that every day of my life, and I gave him that. He said, "You did raw eggs?" I said, "Every morning." He said, "You kidding me?" I said, "No." I said, "Just put them in a blender or whip them up, you know." I said, "Do the shells and everything." I said, you know, but he didn't. He just cracked the eggs. All that stuff came from myself.
Arguably one of the most famous like shots in movie history too, when he cracks the eggs and he drinks it down. So is there? And you guys, wow, I never knew that it was you who gave him all the information on that.
Well, I didn't. I mean,
Philadelphia.
the people thought the story was between myself and Chuck Wepner. I think Wepner sued him and got a lot from him, but Wepner was the bleeder, and I was the fighter, the gangster fighter, and you know, Chuck never ate raw eggs, I guarantee it. So it was just it was something I had done as an athlete. Someone, in fact, I'll tell you a funny story. You know, they in a period of time, there was a salmonella scare on the East Coast from, you know, salmonella.
Oh yeah,
Poison salmonella. And so I called this doctor on the phone. I said, you know, I eat a lot of raw eggs, man. What's the shot at me? He said, "What do you mean?" And I told him, I said, "I eat a half dozen eggs every morning raw." And he said, "You do?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, let me tell you what. If there's a breakout in the area, we want your blood." He said, "Because you are definitely immune, kid. You know, if you're putting that much raw eggs in your body." So, you know, I used to laugh about that. I gave all that to Stallone. Stallone, you know, I don't think he ever ate a raw egg in his life. No.
And it's amazing to me too. Like you're 6'5", correct?
Yeah.
And you're actually the second tallest person on this show right now. I'm actually 6'8". So
are you really?
Yeah, it is nice.
God bless you, man.
It is nice to always meet somebody who's who understands the plight of the big man. But Sylvester Stallone is like 5'5".
Yeah. Oh no. I mean, I remember. I remember when he came out to do Farewell. The guy Joe Spinell, who was in the movie, he was an actor from New York who used to bring a bunch of guys to do fill-in parts. You know, like Joey Archer's brother was in the movie, Jimmy Archer. And he brought all these guys from New York, and they played these little characters like Stallone and all, you know. Mm-hmm. And that's why Stallone put him in The Godfather. I mean, put him in Rocky, and you know, Joe's a nice guy. He's a good guy, but he worked all the time. He was like a working actor, and he'd bring a crew of people out with him. So when they came out, they were there for a few weeks, and that's when every day this kid would sit down and be, "Oh, please tell me about this, tell me about that. I'm writing this great script." Blah, blah, blah. So I gave him a lot of insight as far as the character and what it was like to fight for the title, and you know what would it be like. It turned out to be a great movie. Then when he was doing Rocky II, there was a role. Somebody said to me, "You got to go up." So they wanted me to go see him, and I went to see him at MGM. And all of a sudden he had a platform under his desk, which made him look tall. And I remember going in to see him, and he got up and I said, "Did you grow or what, son? You eating something that's making you grow?" And you know, he just he was always fearful that I think that it would come out where the Rocky story really came from, you know. And I never said anything to anybody. It didn't bother me. God bless him. He made a lot of money from it, you know. But,
yeah, that he did. They're still going on.
Yeah. Yeah, with Creed and Creed 2 and stuff, you know, it's the whole scenario. But it came from me. That's where it came from.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. And it's just incredible. Now you were in two of probably the biggest movies of all time, and you shot them back to back.
Superman 1 and 2, yeah.
Superman 1 and 2.
Great films, yeah.
And you shot those for, was it 2 years that you guys shot?
Oh, we worked all together about 3 years, really. We had we were shooting 1 and 2 together, and we had shot so much of 2 that they had to release 1, and they had to come back to Donner and say, "Yo, man, you got to finish 1 so we can get it out and release it." Yeah. And so we had already shot like 85% of Superman 2, and That's why the Donner cut exists.
Yeah.
If you've never seen the Donner cut, you need to see it.
Oh, it's so, you know, not to take anything away from the theatrical.
Oh, much better film.
The Donner cut is.
And imagine if he had a chance to finish it the way he wanted to, and if they let him, if Donner would have done Superman 2, he'd have done 3, 4, 5, and 6. It would have been a whole different franchise. Much better. And because he lived, eat, and slept Superman. I mean, and how do you cut Marlon Brando out of a picture? You know.
Yeah, I just
they
don't.
cut Marlon out because they didn't want to pay him. They didn't want to pay him the points, and they were screwing him around with the gross receipts, and Marlon was kind of ticked off. And he had already shot the footage because the footage is in the Donner cut. It was already shot. The first 11 days were all Marlon Brando. That's how they got the money for the film. They shot him first, and the bank gave him whatever they wanted because they had him on film. And he looked great. He lost a lot of weight for the film. He looked terrific. You know, he was such an amazing guy. I mean, God, Marlon and I had a lot of fun.
It's interesting to me because connecting with Marlon Brando and maybe talking about The Godfather, did he know that his character was based on your father?
Oh yeah, when he came to do Superman, he couldn't wait to meet me. And Mitchum told me, he said, "Go down on the set and say hello to that bum. Tell him I said hello." And so the first day he came in to England, down at the Ardmore Studio, Pinewood Studios, and he was surrounded by reporters and all that shit. And I walked down to see him, and as soon as he saw me, he broke through the crowd. "Hey, how you doing?" Blah, 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 blah. Because he's a New Yorker, and he knew my father, and he knew who I was. And we became really good friends. And he was such a talent. You know, I was very fortunate in my career to work with some very, very, very good actors. And Superman Terrence Stamp is a brilliant English actor. Probably one of the finest English actors that ever lived.
Oh yeah,
Sarah was a budding star, and you know. And then when you look at all the judges, like when we were in Superman 1, the very first scene where you're guilty, guilty, guilty. I mean, you had Trevor Howard, you had people that were all stalwarts in the English acting scene, you know. And so it was kind of great to be around all those people and feel the energy from them, you know. And Hackman and. You know, Jackie Cooper, and you know, there was just a lot of great actors that were involved in the film.
Well, I wonder too, because Non, the character you play, he was a mute character. Was that something that you had planned?
Well, you know, when they flew, we were doing a picture of March or Die, Hackman and I, down in Spain, and they flew us up to meet Richard Donner, and Donner and I talked about, you know, the character Non, and I said, you know, Jackie Gleason was a friend of mine, and he played a picture called Gigo, and he was a deaf, dumb mute in the picture, and he won an Oscar. And I said, if I ever get an opportunity to play a character like that, I'm going to embrace it, because to be able to use body language and facial expressions to put your deal across is true acting, you know. And when we discussed the character, I said to Donner, I said, you know, you have Terrence Stamp, who's a vicious general. You have Sarah, who's a man-eater. So I'm going to take this big, brutish guy, and I'm going to play him like a child with child mannerisms, where learning how to work his eyes and stuff. And he said, wow, what a great idea. And I said, yeah. I said, you have to have somebody has to relate to the kids. So you have a big child audience here. Mm-hmm. And it worked out pretty well, you know, just it was good.
Well, you know, I've read in the past, especially when it comes to Superman, that when they were first starting, before Richard Donner had taken over, I guess they were thinking about doing a parody version of it, and there was talks of James Caan doing the role and other parts. And then once Richard Donner came in, he was like, "No, we're going to do this right." Well,
they had auditioned like 20 people for Superman. I mean, some of them really ridiculous. You know, they should have never even thought about it. But Christopher was young. I mean, he had never done anything. as far as film work concerned. He did some television, Love of Life, some soap opera, and I think a few stage plays. But he had never done anything on screen. And Donner saw a look that he liked. And the kid only weighed like 170 pounds the first time he ever came on a scene. So when they went to, knew they were going to have to build him up. And the guy that played Darth Vader was a bodybuilder. And he and I sat down one day and I said, you know, you don't want to take this kid and bulk him. You want to do like, there was a Mr. America, Steve Reeves, did Hercules. Steve Reeves, when he was Mr. America, he was like 189 pounds, but he was cut perfectly. The definition was incredible. I said, so you want to do this with this kid? Define him. Don't bulk him, define him. Because Christopher had a bit of an ego, and if he put the costume on, he wasn't going to wear anything underneath of it to make him look like built out. So it was all natural and make him look natural. And it worked really well. They put like, I think he was about 190 some pounds when we did the picture. And he was cut really good, boy, you know, but he did the transition from Superman to Clark Kent. Donner got a performance out of that kid that he never would have gotten from anybody else. And there'll never be another Superman like Christopher. I mean, he had a great look. He had a great persona about the whole thing. But that was Richard Donner. Richard Donner brought that out of them, you know. Yeah. And that's why when they were going to use Lester, you know, for a finish, Christopher should have stood up and said, "Listen, no Donner, no me," and it would have been a whole different franchise. And so Hackman never came back. I almost didn't go back, but it was sad, you know. It was just would have been a much different franchise altogether. But Superman 1 and Superman 2 were great films because of the technology barriers that we broke. But to watch the Donner cut is like night and day.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. One thing that always, I don't know how you feel, and I'd love to know about the giant S. The giant, cellophane S. That just at you guys. That was a couldn't have been a Donner thing.
No, it was just you got to understand that, you know, when somebody comes on a picture like that, for them to take credit as a director, they have to shoot more than 50% of the film. So Lester went back and reshot a lot of things, you know, that some things he couldn't do, but he did. They replaced Brando with the woman, and they had to shoot all that. So, you know, it was just like night and day, working night and day, believe me. If Donner would have had a chance to finish the way he wanted to, I mean, but even the Donner cut, the finish of it is not bad, and the beginning of it is not bad. The beginning shots, they used the audition that Christopher and Margot put together. That was, you know, that's what they used to start the film. I mean, everything Donner did was so much more superior. I mean, he's just a great director. You know?
Yeah. Well, if I can ask, there was kind of an odds between you and Christopher Reeve during filming.
Everybody gets it. I tell you, you know, if you're working with people for 2 or 3 years together and you're working tight, man, you're like, you know, you're every day, 16-hour days and things of that nature. You know, if you don't have squabbles of some nature, something's very wrong. You know what I mean? There's always going to be misunderstanding somewhere along the line. And we had there was a famous restaurant in London, and it's still there, San Marino. And they were real dear friends of mine, and they were Italians. It was one of the first Italian restaurants in London. So I promoted all the people on the set to go eat there, you know, at night and stuff, because they were good friends, and, you know. And I used to eat there every night because I lived right down the street, and it was like my kitchen. I'd go up and sit down and eat my dinner. And I had friends of mine from London that I knew that were hoodlums, and we would have meetings there at night and stuff. And then the cast people would come and they would sit at another part of the restaurant, and all of them would sit there and have dinner and stuff. And one night, the guy that owned the restaurant, who was a dear friend, called me on the phone. He said, "Jack," he said, "what do you know? How well do you know this Christopher Reeve kid?" And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" I said, "We just worked together." He said, "Well, he's in there talking about your father and about you and your organized crime connections in New York." And he said, "I think he's really talking out of school." I said, "He's doing what?" And so the next day, I waited for him to come to work. I took him into a room and we had a very serious discussion.
Yeah.
And I thought it was pretty much understood and straightened out. And then when we walked out into the hall and all these people are there, like a big crowd of people, all of a sudden he became Superman. He said, "You can't talk to me that way." And I said, what? He started with his bullshit, and I grabbed him and I threw him against the wall, and I was ready to smack him. And Donner jumped up in my ear and he said, "Jack, not in the face. Don't hit him in the face." and that's what I did. I laughed. I just dropped him on the floor. I said, "Kid, you just got to thank this man right here for the pass of your life. Believe me when I tell you." And I walked away, and there was never any more said about it. And years later, everybody thought, "Wow, you had this big argument with Christopher Reeve. You beat up Superman." And oh my God,
No, I just it's an amazing story. It really is. I mean, totally.
Well, it is, I guess, but that's what I Donner made me laugh. I mean, I had this kid up, and I would have whipped the shit out of him, but not in the face, Jack. Don't hit him in the face. And I thought about it, and I just dropped him on the floor, and I said, "Oh man, you don't know how lucky you are, kid."
Well, one movie that I absolutely adore and I'm happy to talk to you about is Dragnet.
Oh, great film! Yeah, we had a lot of fun doing that. It was Tom Hanks' breakout movie, and Danny. I mean, you could watch Dragnet 50 times, and you would never get all the one-liners that Danny Aykroyd threw out. I mean, he had the thing in his ear and was listening to Jack Webb all the time. And Danny's such a great natural comedian, and he's a great actor, period. But when it comes to comedy, he has a great way of portraying himself. And the way they did Dragnet, I thought really worked very well. They didn't do it real serious. They put just the right mixture in there, And I like the character Emil Muzz, and Tom Mankiewicz directed it. Tom was from Superman.
Mm-hmm.
Tom's a super guy, and so it was a pleasure working with him. And he knew the depth of what I could do, and what I would do with Emil Muzz. It's like the scene when they're interrogating me and stuff. It turned out really well. It was good.
Truly fantastic. And you worked with Christopher Plummer on that. I mean,
yeah, Christopher's a super guy. What a nice man.
I mean, it's Robert Mitchum, it's Gene Hackman, it's Christopher Plummer.
Well, I was very lucky. I worked with a lot of great actors in my career. I mean, when I did the Baltimore Bullet, I worked with Coburn, and Omar Sharif was a trip. Omar was just, and he's such a great actor. I mean, God, he's got such a presence. He's such a nice guy, man. I mean, I have so many funny stories about him. We were eating breakfast. We were in New Orleans shooting one time, and we were eating breakfast, he and I, in a restaurant. And the women were lined up all the way around the block, waiting for him to stop eating breakfast. And I said to him, "Man, you go through this every day?" He said, "Oh, Jack, you have no idea. We have to put out phony hotels where I'm staying." He said, "It's crazy." He said. I said, "Well, I guess you don't have any dating problems, huh?"
Yeah.
But he had that look about him, and he was a great actor. I mean,
no,
he was such a good guy. God, I liked Omar a lot. And Jimmy Coburn was a super guy, and it was Bruce Boxleitner's first picture. So I've been, and then you work with, the talent that I've worked with in my career, and we did March or Die, and Hackman did that picture with me, and there was Catherine Deneuve, and Terence Hill, who was the biggest European Italian actor of that time, blonde hair, blue eyed guy who did all these spaghetti westerns with Bud Spencer. And it was the first time he spoke in English in a picture. So it was interesting, all the different characters and people, Marcel Bazuffi and Ian Holm. And Ian Holm was a great Shakespearean actor out of England. He was in March or Die with us.
It's coming in, though. You are a legit tough guy coming into Hollywood. I mean, you are not just you're not just a made man in the mafia. You're a heavyweight contender boxer. And then you're working on all these tough guys in Hollywood. What did you had to be the guy they went to be like, how am I getting this right? In certain roles and things like.
Yeah, they did. No, they did.
I mean, you inspired Rocky, and so.
No, a lot of people came to me and different. I have a lot of friends and different, and a lot of people that played mafia characters and stuff. We sit down and chat, and they knew who I was and where I came from, and they were in awe that I was even in the business.
Yeah.
God, man, and I said, and I guess where I came from actually cost me in a certain way. Where when I did Farewell My Lovely, Mitchum put together a meeting with Johnny Carson, and I met him at the Polo Lounge, and he said, if you do my show, I'll get you nominated for supporting actor, which I had a very good shot at that year. It was kind of a weak year for a supporting actor, and Farewell came out very well, and so Mitchum thought that I would win the Oscar if I did the show and allowed the publicity to be done. And when I met John, and he was very adamant that he would get me nominated, and I said, but your show is live, isn't it? And he said, yeah. I said, I don't think I can do it. He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, I'll come on your show. You're going to ask me about my father, and I'll ask you where the men's room's at. He said, you would actually get up and leave? And I said, yeah. I said, don't talk about my father. I don't talk about my life in the street. I was just off the streets, and I was very aware of statute of limitations, and I was very aware of, certain things that it's like a hell of a crossover, and you're being publicized every day. There's your picture and being shown everywhere, and there's Law and Order guys saying, wait a minute, I want to tie that guy in over here. And it gives them an excuse that it's publicity, that if they lock you up, it makes a big deal out of everything. So I was very protective of that. And I declined to do his show. And he said, wow, man. I said, I appreciate it. He said, well, we'll give you a list of questions that we're going to ask. I said, listen, no disrespect, John. I said, but you're the #1 news guy in the country with your show and stuff. I said, and here you have Albert Anastasia's son on your set, and you're not going to ask me about my father. I said, come on. I said, no disrespect, but you wouldn't be able to help yourself. Mm-hmm. And he looked at me and he laughed, and I said, so I left. And Mitchum called me on the phone. He said, are you out of your mind? He said, this is Hollywood. They love that stuff. They would have eaten it up. What's wrong with you? He said, that was a shoo-in for you. And I just said, well, I just wasn't ready to. I said, you got a big mouth, man. Because he knew a lot about me, Mitchum. And I became really close. I said, you're telling these people all these stories. I said, you don't get me in trouble, son. He said, Jack, this is Hollywood. This is what it's about. Stories is what it's all about. And I should have listened to him. I was dumb. Should have listened to him.
When did it get to a point when you put out Family Legacy?
Well, I thought about a lot of things, and I watched all the things that Hollywood took a lot of liberties, with The Godfather and other things. And Godfather was pretty close, but Coppola wrote what he was told to write. They did what he was supposed to do. And it was probably the best version of the mafia that they've ever done. And that's why the films were so good. But they take such liberties with pictures and tell stories that are not really there's so many conspiracy theories running around, and they took their version of it, and it made us look very bad. And an amazing part about Hollywood is there's no crystal ball. No one can tell you what film is going to do this or do that, but the genre of organized crime pictures have never lost any money. None of them. Even the spoofs that they do make money. And that's phenomenal. You understand? So
it's an amazing genre.
you
Yeah.
turn around and you say to yourself, well, a lot of friends of mine sat down and said, listen, it's time we tell the truth, man, about. And what the truth of the fact is that in the beginning, you go back to like 1920, organized crime, government, industry, and unions were all partners. And the money that they made in organized crime, they put back into the growth of a country. They created a lot of jobs because their wealth came from gambling, loan sharking, and extortion. If you didn't have money, how could you pay them? So they made sure you went to work. And that's what I was explaining to Stallone about guys being put to work on the waterfront and stuff like that to pay their gambling debts. And, no one ever tells the true story of how they helped grow the country. And my father ran all the ports in America. And, when Genovese wanted to go into the drug business big time, and Albert kept saying, not a good idea. And the Godfather, when Brando turns it down, that's my father did that. He's the one that said, if we touch it, and he said, you're not bringing that stuff through my ports. Not on my watch, man. It ain't happening. Yeah. And when they assassinated him, they knew they made a terrible, terrible mistake because Albert was the glue that held everybody together. Because people were scared shitless. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't walk across the street wrong when he was there. And they never, Murder Inc. wasn't aimed at any innocent people. They just took care of family business. They didn't go around shooting people and stuff like that. So it was a whole different persona. And things changed after Albert was killed. And it gave the FBI a liberty to come out of the woodwork because of what Genovese did in the Appalachian thing. By having all those guys running through the woods and all that shit. I mean, holding that meeting in a little town like that. He didn't think he was going to create a lot of stir, all these Cadillacs and people driving into town. And he gave them an excuse to expose a lot of things. And it changed the whole complexion of what organized crime in America was. It gave them the liberty to take a lot of pot shots and throw people under the bus. So, we sat and thought about it a long time, and I sat down with some dear friends, and I said, you know what, I'm going to write a book, and let's tell the truth about a lot of stuff. Nice. And when I wrote the book, I had to sit down with the government because they weren't going to let me publish it nonfiction. So we made a deal that I would do 20% fiction, the rest real, and they said, yeah, that's okay, as long as you're confusing people. So, that's what we did. And the book's a great read, and we should have publicized it better probably, but we're going to do it now. So we're coming out with another book in about 30, 45 days. And
oh, great.
Then we have a couple more after that. And then we've got Charlie Luciano's book. His son is a good friend of mine. So we're going to incorporate the material. So now instead of doing a film, we're going to do a miniseries because there's so much material to cover. And from the miniseries, it'll go into a series. And it'll probably be the most ass-kicking series ever done.
Oh, that'd be great.
A lot of the audience will be from people from 100 all the way down to teenagers because families talk about things that they knew in the street that happened, but they never see it publicized. And they always ask the question, why don't they say that on the news,
Yeah.
And now it's going to be shown. And the grandfathers will be saying, see, I told you so. So you have a built-in audience, Which is, when I wrote the book, I gave it to 4 high school kids, and they came back to me and they said, my God, why come they never taught us any of this in school? And they went to the library and looked up names and stuff. And I told them, it's all right there in the library. Just go and look it up. It's there,
Yeah. As we're kind of winding down on the interview, I like to end things and like kind of like do something fun and bring some levity to it. And one thing I was thinking about is I'm just going to mention some mafia movies, and you just tell me, is it close or is it BS?
Well, they just did The Irishman, yeah?
Yeah, that was one of the ones I was definitely going to ask you about.
And that's total bullshit. I mean, I knew Frank Phelan very well. Frank was from Philadelphia, and he was a tough guy, and he was Hoffa's driver. And, yeah, he whacked a few people in his life. when they did the book Painting Houses, You Paint Houses, but he never killed Hoffa, and he never killed Joey Gallo. And Buffalino was a dear friend of mine from Western Pennsylvania, and a strong, strong Don and a good guy. And Russell would turn over in his grave if he saw that movie. I believe me when I tell you, man, because Russell was a smart Don boy. He made a lot of money, and he was a political stronghold. He was the connection in Washington, and but and his nephew was Hoffa's lawyer, Billy, and so Hollywood took a lot of liberties with that picture. And that's the kind of stuff that makes me a bit aggravated, because Jimmy Hoffa was a friend of mine. And Jimmy, the true story of Hoffa has to be told. And I think we're going to just do it. It's Jimmy was a man's man. Jimmy Hoffa would never ask you to do what he wouldn't do himself.
Really?
Okay. Oh, yeah. Jimmy was, I mean, if you look at the changes that he did, he took a truck driver back in the 30s. The guy worked 18 hours a day driving. He loaded the truck, he drove the truck, and he unloaded the truck for minimal money. You understand? Mm-hmm. And Hoffa changed all that. And they accused him of stealing $8,000 from a pension fund that he created. There was no pension fund before Hoffa. Hoffa created the pension fund. Hoffa created job security, created the Teamster drivers. Today, all they do is drive a truck. They don't touch freight. They don't unload it. They don't load it. They just drive the truck. And you have guys that are lawyers that, because they love being out in the open air and they can make 6 digits a year driving over the road, they're driving trucks. You understand?
Yeah.
And Jimmy did all that. And, to say that he stole $8,000 to fix his house was the most ludicrous thing I ever heard in my life, because if Hoffa wanted to fix his house, people would have lined up to do it for nothing, because he was that loved by people, by craftsmen and union people. They loved him. And, Jimmy would have never steal $8,000. I mean, it's like a joke.
How did you feel about the Jack Nicholson portrayal of Hoffa years earlier?
Well, they still didn't hit it on the head. I mean, they came close, but Jimmy was his own worst enemy in certain ways. The union was his life. Mm-hmm. And when he went away, I don't know if you remember when Hoffa, you're probably too young to remember when he was locked up. Truck drivers lined up all the way up to Lewisburg, to prison, honking their horns on the side of the road as he drove past. And they took him to prison. And when he was talking to us from Boston, right before he went away, and they said, Jimmy, you really don't have to go to jail. Every Teamster in the country will walk off his job if you ask them to. And the country had already made the transition from rail to truck. So if every Teamster would have walked off their job, the country would have come to a standstill. And Jimmy said, no, they think I did the crime, I'll do the time. And, he said, and he thought he was only going in for 90 days. He thought that it would be fixed and he would be out. He backed the wrong president, and he stayed there for a few years. And the deal he made to get out was ludicrous. And it was a terrible deal. And he wasn't allowed to touch the union for X amount of years and stuff. And when he come home, he just walked into Fitzsimmons' office, said, you're at my desk, get out. And Fitzsimmons said, Jimmy, you're going to get us in a lot of trouble. You're not allowed to be here. He said, this is my union, and I'm taking it back today. And Fitzsimmons was a puppet for certain people, because they blew up his son's car and they scared the shit out of him. So he rolled over for a lot of people, and he gave a lot of Teamster loans out to people and stuff they shouldn't have done. And Jimmy, he got on the phone and he was talking to somebody from New York, and they said to him, Jimmy, just wait a little bit. We'll sort everything out. Just take your time. Don't push things too fast, and let us fix this thing. And he kept saying, I want my union back, and I want it back now. And, when you people wanted money for, like Vegas, where they put up $25 million for Caesar's Palace, but every one of those loans were repaid. There was nothing that was given away. It was all repaid, and they were all good loans. And he kept pushing the button. They kept saying to him, Jimmy, you're on the phone. Jimmy, you're talking on the phone. Just leave it be. Let us take care of it. We'll sort it out. And he said the wrong thing. He said, I'll go to the press. And the guy hung the phone up in New York. It was the end of Hopper, and it was very sad because, like I said, he was a great union leader. You'll never find another one like him. I'll tell you that.
That's truly amazing. And I had heard that the Irishman took a lot of liberties, but that's
a lot. Let me tell you. I mean, Frank was a tough guy. I knew Frank pretty well. In fact, I almost kicked his ass in Philly one time over a matter, and he was. He was a strong arm for some people, and he drove Hoffa around, and he had a reputation that was bullshit, a lot of it. But a lot of people in those days did have those kind of stupid reputations. And anybody has to brag about being able to do this and do that is not really that person. You understand?
Yeah.
Because unless you're looking to go to jail, and you don't mind going to jail, it's kind of dumb to make broad statements about things. And so they took a lot of liberties, and I saw the film. I said, "Wow, man!" And everybody went crazy because you're talking about stories that everybody's been looking for answers for.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like the book Family Legacy. It starts with my father's death, and it goes reverts back and forth to old times and how things happened, and I end it with telling the truth about the Kennedy assassination. And there is a truth. And all that comes out every 10 years, more stuff comes out. The one bullet theory is already down the toilet because Oswald wasn't even in the building, and the fact that 3 shots were fired from a mail order rifle bolt action with any accuracy in 28 seconds is total bullshit. And there was a prison right across the street from the Byrd building, and people looked right at that window, and there were 3 people in the window, 2 dark complected and one white guy, and there was 2 Cubans and a white guy. And it's just I could tell you a lot of variables. Read the book, you'll like it.
Yeah, that's the big thing. And everybody listening, make sure you check out the book Family Legacy by Jack O'Halloran, and the true stories behind the mafia. That's the important thing. And do you have anything? I'm really looking forward. I'd love to see a miniseries of your stories.
Yeah, it's going to be great. The miniseries is really going to be powerful. I mean, it's going to be very powerful, and it's and we're looking forward to doing it because it's time that some truth was told. So it's good. And then the series will just. There's so much material when you go from state to state and the interfacing between Europe and America and Asia and you put the pieces together, it'll come out like a puzzle, and you say, wow, man. And these are things that people lived through that they never saw put in print. And they always walked around whispering, how come they don't tell the truth about this or that or the other thing? It's like when I was a kid growing up in Philly, we never locked our front doors. People slept in their backyards in the summertime because there was no air conditioning in those days, and no one ever broke into your house or bothered you, or you could leave a baby pram outside, no one ever touched it, and because the cities were looked after by certain people. You lived in Jersey City. Jersey City was a well looked after city. There were certain areas you didn't go into in Jersey City, or you get in trouble if you did. If you committed a crime in certain places, there were people you had to answer to. You understand?
Oh, absolutely.
And, that's the way it was. And, but everywhere was like that. Newark was like that. I mean, as bad as Newark was, there was a controlling factor of Newark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you knew who to respect, and that was that.
You bet your ass you did. And they were very, very prominent. They were there. You knew where you could walk across what lines and what lines you couldn't walk across.
Yeah.
And
I'll take a fight with that guy.
It's just there was a different. But those days they're sliding away more and more and more. And it's just it's very sad when I see it happening in areas. It's just it's sad. It really is sad. And it's time that some people were told the truth, so changes can be made, and Americans can stand up and be Americans and take their damn country back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care whether you're black, yellow, orange, or whatever color you are. If you're born in America, you're an American.
Yeah, no, I definitely, and with more books coming out and things like that, I definitely appreciate and can't wait to hear more of this, the true stories behind everything as it comes along.
There's a lot of things that have been taken so out of context. It's just silly, ridiculous, but
Is
it
there
is what it is.
is there anything you like to promote coming up, or?
Well, we're building a studio in Nevada, which is going to be huge. It's going to be great. It's going to be great for the industry. We're putting a 4 million square foot studio in Nevada. And for the first time, everything will be under one roof. And we're building a smart city next to it to house like 30,000 people who will be employed. So they only have 15 minutes to drive to work, which will make everything cost effective for everybody across the board.
Oh.
And a lot more relaxing rather than drive 2 hours to go to work. You only have 15 minutes,
Yeah.
So the whole conditions and everything will be superlative to what they are today. And the industry will probably move to Nevada. And then we're going to do Family Legacy and the miniseries and series. I got another picture in Ireland that I'm going to do that I wrote a long time ago, which is a great story. And it was done back in the 30s. It was called The Informer, Victor McLaglen and
Yes.
John Ford.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
we've written another adaptation of the book, and we're getting ready to do that. I wrote the script like 40 years ago. And I've turned it down 4 or 5 times because I wanted it done correctly. So we're getting a chance to do that. And we're very excited about that as well.
I'm very much looking forward to that. I love The Informer. It's a great movie.
Yeah, and I'll do the McLaughlin role. I'm going to do Gyp Nolan. So finally get my Oscar.
All right, well, I'll be pulling for you. And thank you so much for being on the show, Jack.
My pleasure, man.
It's been fantastic.
Hope your audience appreciates everything, and it was a nice time spent. Thank you.
I know they will. Thank you very much, and you have a great day.
Okay. You too.
Take care.